How long are we going to go for, guys?
Forever. We're going to go forever.
Yeah, 4 hours.
12 years. Rachel's going to hate me. All right. So you're alive. I think probably live.
We're just gonna let it flow naturally. Do you guys have a deadline? Do you guys have a hard stop?
No.
None.
You don't have like
Okay,
a bedtime? Am I the only one
Nope.
here with a bedtime?
Yes, George, you are.
We go live and then we put on our masks. Everybody. Yes. Welcome to the Secret Podcast. This is a robbery! No. Welcome to the Secret Podcast, Quarantine Edition. I can't breathe in this thing either. So, like we said before, we decided to, since everybody's in quarantine, just kind of get together and on a live stream and just sort of go over some stuff. So today, we're joined by Bill and Ken, and we're going to talk about Roanoke. Bradley has prepared for this, so I'm going to leave this up to Bradley. Bradley, why don't you take us into this?
All right.
Hello, wonderful community. I'm sure we don't have any viewers quite yet, but you guys are probably going to be strolling in, and you might catch this later. But yeah, we're just going to have an informal conversation. Let me get rid of this mask. I can't breathe. Actually, I can breathe. I just can't see. My glasses are all foggy. There we go. All right, cool. I mean, this still protects me if I'm just letting it hang, right? I mean, that's how they work. So anyways, yeah, we're going to talk about Roanoke. We're going to talk about a couple different approaches to Roanoke. We've got some really cool photos to share, courtesy of Ken. And we're going to talk about building relationships with the parks and how to earn trust and do things the proper way. And we're going to talk about growing up in areas and how that's a big plus. Obviously, we know from the Chicago Finders that was found because they're from Chicago. They knew the area. They saw the water tower, and they're like, holy shit, this is my hometown. So we're going to be talking to Bill, who's spent a lot of his vacations with his family growing up in that area. Ken is Bill's from, well, you know what? Hey, instead of having me do it, why don't you guys introduce yourselves? We'll start. Bill, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Bill Alloway. I live in Northern Virginia. Like Bradley said, I grew up spending a lot of summer vacations down there in Nags Head and Kill Devil's Hill and the Roanoke area. It was just kind of like a tradition, what we did back then growing up. So I've been to the Wright Brothers Memorial and the Lost Colony and the Elizabethan Gardens dozens of times. So back in the 80s growing up.
Awesome. Ken?
Yeah, hey everybody. My name is Ken Getz, and I live in North Carolina, live in Raleigh. And when I learned about The Secret, it was natural for me to gravitate towards the Roanoke puzzle because it's in my backyard. I'm about an hour and a half or so drive from all the action is, and it's a fantastic puzzle. And I've spent a lot of brain power trying to muscle through this puzzle, and I enjoy it. I enjoy the challenge. It's fun. I think this is a fantastic journey, and I'm really excited to be able to share some of my observations tonight.
And my name's George. I don't really know much about this puzzle, and I mean, Virginia is a nice state and all, but I don't know if I would bury a treasure in Roanoke.
Well, according to EU, it's in Roanoke, Virginia, right? It's not in... Yeah, it's in Virginia. It's not in North Carolina. At least according to the first episode.
So before you go, let me tell you really quick how I got introduced to, like, my first trip to Roanoke.
George, this is my show. I'm running things.
Whatever.
So, George, if you could just tell us how you got into the Roanoke puzzle, maybe tell us about a trip to Roanoke.
Hey guys, watch how if I click this button, Bradley goes away.
No.
So my first trip to Roanoke was super awesome. I got a ticket for speeding and for running a red light. I went to Roanoke and we got there at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that. I don't know. It was enough time for me to wander through the park while it was still a little dark. And then I sat in a parking lot for 2 hours in the dark at like midnight and waited on somebody I had never met before, only for that person to come and for us to walk the park and talk a little bit, and then find out that he was planning with his wife on throat punching me if we found a cask and stealing it. Now, just so all of you know, would you like to know who that person was? Let me introduce my co-host, Bradley.
I don't know what he's talking about. These are all lies.
That was the first time Bradley and I met. It was an awesome trip. Glad I didn't get throat punched.
It was a phenomenal trip, and my wife made it a point. She said, if you guys find it, throat punch him, grab it, and run. Of course, she told me that on speakerphone while I was standing next to him, so kind of got rid of the surprise factor. But it's absolutely true. We also he left out the most exciting part. We found a ghost while we were there. I think we talked about it on the podcast before.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So the theater used to be wide open for you to walk around anytime you want to, and so it was 2 a.m. and we're walking around the theater, and out of nowhere, this figure just like stands up like near one of the seats, and it's like 2 a.m. and it's pitch black and there's nothing going on.
It was like 7 feet tall. It was crazy.
It was ridiculous, and I just turned around and my instinct was to go, "Hello." And then I just kept walking. It was insane.
It was scary.
Walking, I'd be running. I would be running.
I try not to create that prey predatory response.
Whatever it was told us hello first, that it was like deepest voice was
I was like, hello.
It was super creepy.
Yeah.
But that's what they say. They say that area is haunted, by the colonists, by Virginia Dare and the whole lost colony. You're not the first to to believe that they saw something. So, yeah.
A little slip there, yeah.
Virginia Dare is super tall and has a very deep voice.
It was scary. So yeah. Yeah, that was our first trip. It was a lot of fun. That's when I met George for the first time. And yeah, that's not the first time I went to Roanoke, but that was the first time George did. And dude, you got a ticket the next time for like your tail light or something.
Was it the next? See, these trips I get mixed up. I think the next time I was going to pay the ticket.
Oh,
yeah,
gotcha.
It was for I ran a red light because it was on the main drag and I wasn't used to it and I couldn't see the red light. But whatever, that was my excuse. They let me off because I'm a firefighter.
Yes. Nice. Awesome. Nice. So now we all know each other, and we all know how we've come to visit Roanoke. Let's talk about how you guys got into the puzzle, just kind of overall. Everybody knows George and my story, I think. So Ken, how did you get into the puzzle?
Yeah, an Expedition Unknown episode. I mean, it's no question that I didn't know anything about The Secret until then. I happened to watch one of the first viewing, one of the first shows, about it. And God, I don't remember when that was, but you guys probably know better than I do. But it was about 2 years ago, something like that. Maybe it seems like 2 years ago, but
it was in 2017.
Yeah, that was about right, and immediately gravitated to it, and looked into it and saw the Roanoke one, and I was in North Carolina, so immediately gravitated to that puzzle and started working on it. So that's how I got into it.
Awesome. Did you so since you got into it on EU, obviously you watched the show. Did you ever see the episode where he went to do just on the Lost Colony and he was in the play?
Yeah, he participates in the play.
Yeah,
it's fantastic. I love
Absolutely.
Josh Gates. He's so funny, and he did a great job in that episode. And yeah, he did a really good job. Going through that was fun.
The actress that plays the Queen that was in that episode, she played the Queen for several years, is actually one of my wife's friends from college.
Oh wow, fantastic!
So Bill, how did you get into The Secret?
Exact same thing. It was that very first episode of Expedition Unknown, and at the end, as they were showing the paintings. When they showed the Roanoke painting, he said Virginia, and I was like, "What, Virginia?" So I immediately that's what drew me in, and then I found out right away it's not Virginia, but it's an area that I'm familiar with. And then that led me to New York, that led me to Montreal, that led me to all the other puzzles, and where I'm at today with everything. So
awesome.
Same thing. Josh Gates and Expedition Unknown.
Yeah. Very cool. So what's been your approach to the puzzle? And now we chatted earlier and we kind of talked about your overall thoughts on the puzzle. But before we get into that, how do you get into researching whenever you're trying to figure out a puzzle? And Bill, since you were just talking, let's go ahead and stay with you.
For me, I think it's pretty much, I don't want to say the agreed upon traditional approach, but I think the verse and the painting work together. I think the verse you have to follow to get you there. The painting gives you the visual clues, whether it's the city icon, or a city locator, all the way down to the finer details, and of course, in the final dig icon. So they work together, I think, but you have to follow the verse. And the verse, I think that gets you there. And then the painting just gives you the visual clues.
Okay, gotcha. Ken, how about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I largely agree. But what I would say that the interesting thing about this particular image is I don't think it gives you a very specific dig spot, right? If you think about the Augustine puzzle, it's at a base of a small tree, right? You look at the Cleveland puzzle is, I think, very specific where you're supposed to dig. Boston, arguably, you have home plate, right? But here it just says it's under something, and so I actually think this puzzle's going to be slightly different in terms of the exact dig location, right? I mean, you've heard the phrase, if you're off by an inch, you're off by a mile, right? So I do think in this puzzle, you have to use a little bit more of the painting to be able to hone in on the exact dig location than I think we've seen in the other puzzles. That's my feeling.
Okay, gotcha. And as far as so we're talking about the verse and the images and how those work together and how to read them. But as far as just digging in and getting to the meat and figuring things out, for instance, George and I have visited the library there in Roanoke, on Roanoke Island. We've gone through every single program they have on file. We visited the Historical Society, gotten aerial photographs of the area. We've gotten all sorts of really cool dated photos. Talk to the locals. How do you guys go about researching to find information on the area?
Well, just speaking for myself, I mean, I've also gone to the Roanoke Historical Association. I went through a lot of their content. I also submitted a FOIA request to the National Park Service, so I spent some time with that, and I have received.
For those that don't know what that is, can you explain what that is?
Yeah, sure. The FOIA is a Freedom of Information Act request, and National Park Service is a federal agency. It's under the jurisdiction of the Freedom of Information Act, which means that you can submit a request. It actually doesn't cost any money. You can do the whole thing online, and you submit a request, and you simply say, "Here's the information I'm looking for." And then the government typically takes a long time. Eventually they get back to you, and they send you the documents that meet your request. Basically, that's how it works. And so I submitted a FOIA to the National Park Service to get information about, the whole area. You can't do it for the Elizabethan Gardens, but you can certainly do it for the park at Roanoke, and tried to get as much information as we could that way. A lot of online searching. I think I spent an entire weekend reading every thread on Q4T. Spent a lot of time on the quote unquote wiki. And I use that in quotes because I don't really think it's a wiki. It's just one person's opinion. But, I spent a lot of time on the wiki. I spent a lot of time in Facebook groups that, you moderate, Bradley, and others. So, just really trying to read about it and then just think about it, trying to put yourself in Byron Preiss's shoes and trying to figure out what was he trying to lead you to figure out, because I do feel Byron Preiss was trying to get you to solve the problem. Like, he was not trying to build puzzles that didn't have a solution. He was trying to build puzzles that would actually be solved by somebody. So, if you make the assumption that Byron was trying to help you solve the puzzle, it actually helps you get through it. So, that's been my journey.
Awesome. Phil?
Yeah, for Roanoke, it was just a little bit of online searching. Just refamiliarizing myself with the area using Google Maps, Google Earth. I didn't really need that much. To me, it was all pretty obvious once you put the verse and the painting, what I believe works together. Some of the other puzzles, like Montreal, I had to do a lot more digging and, actually going to Montreal, visiting the Mount Stevens Club and doing a lot more because of how much Montreal's changed throughout time, and the city and Drummond Street. So I had to really do a lot more research there. But with Roanoke, the way I approached it, where I feel it's buried, the dig icon that I have, I wasn't that much. Okay. It was pretty easy. Just a little bit of online searching they're available to everybody. The way I approach all these puzzles is I think of Byron's demographic. he was targeting, in my opinion, 14 to 21-year-olds. And at that time, you have only a few resources. You have dictionary, a library card, encyclopedia, a map, your imagination, and a sense of adventure. That's all I think you need, or what Byron felt and what he put in there that you needed to solve these. Period.
Awesome.
Very simple. And that's why, like Burnside is always saying, keep it simple, keep it simple, keep
I
it
agree
simple.
with that.
The second you start flipping images, the second you start doing overlays, anything, you're done.
And I would just add that even though I've sort of really focused most of my energy on Roanoke, I do think in order to solve Roanoke or any other puzzle, you have to have familiarity with the other puzzles. I think you have to look at all the puzzles and understand the texture of the clues that were provided, not just for the solved ones, but for the unsolved ones as well. So, yeah, I obviously paid a lot of attention to the solved casks, but also we need to look at what were these poems trying to do? Like, what were some of the things that other people have observed about some of the other images and poems, and how does that potentially produce a pattern that will allow you to take something away for the Roanoke puzzle?
See, I agree with you that it's helpful to kind of get an idea of how does this puzzle maker make puzzles. What is his style, you might say. I'll disagree with you that you have to know how the other ones are solved to solve one. Because when Chicago was found, obviously it was the first one found. They didn't know anything about the other ones. Cleveland, when Cleveland was found, they had no idea that Chicago had been found.
And they knew.
Yeah,
they knew for a long time.
No.
Yes, dude, you need to bone up on your history a little bit.
Dude, I've heard him say that they didn't know if
they
it was really
knew for a long time.
I'm calling Brian tomorrow.
Years and years.
No,
Chicago. They found out about Chicago before Q for T was even around. We were still on GeoCities back then. It was like a weird GeoCity site where Rob popped up and was like, "Hey, did I solve Chicago?" And everybody was like, "Chicago? That's a city?"
Huh.
It was years before Cleveland.
Before we started, I told you George and I don't always agree.
It's a good, it's a good point though. It's like Cleveland's got nothing to do with Chicago. I mean, they kind of work the same, but you don't need to know anything about Chicago to solve Cleveland. And Boston, you don't need to know anything about Cleveland or Chicago to solve Boston.
No, you guys are absolutely right. But you're trying to get into the mind of the puzzle master, right? And what were the sorts of things that he used in one puzzle, and is there anything you can take away from that might give you a tool to be able to use to solve this one? So, I think if you just focus on one puzzle in isolation, you're just not optimizing your chances of really understanding, what Byron is trying to do. So,
so you've got 12 puzzles, you've got 3 of them are solved. If you the problem you run into is if you start focusing all on the ones that are not solved, trying to find common similarities or whatever, you can invent things that aren't really there. And that's a problem that I see a lot of people online. Like they'll create these patterns that don't exist or just exist in their head.
I see a lot of that.
There are patterns.
They weren't intended to exist.
There are patterns that are there, but have nothing to do with the puzzle, most likely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like for instance, St. Augustine and Roanoke, right? I mean, we will have 2 outdoor theaters, major plays written by the same person, but does that really have anything to do with the puzzle? Who knows? But it's definitely a connection. But and to Bill's point about keeping things simple, how was Cleveland solved? Well, Brian was Google searching the names in the verse. Boom, image pops up of the gardens, and it's an exact match to the painting. And I mean, you don't get much simpler than that, right? I mean, obviously he had a lot of work in before that, but that was the clincher for them. So we've kind of talked about overall arching ways to approach the puzzles. So let's talk about something really interesting, a story that I'm dying to hear. Ken, we talked a little earlier today, and you talked about building relationships with the Elizabethan Gardens, with the executive director. Tell us from the beginning, kind of how you started to build that relationship and where it went from there and kind of where you guys are.
So when I first started looking at the possibility of actually doing a real dig in the area of the Elizabethan Gardens, what I did was I started a relationship with somebody I met on the wiki, and this is somebody who had previously had a relationship with the Elizabethan Gardens, and he was telling me a little bit about some of the conversations he's had with people there. And he had suggested that the folks at the Elizabethan Gardens had done a lot of work actually on this, and that they had done what do you call the scans of the ground? God, GP. What do you call it? GPR, ground penetrating radar. He had told me that the staff there had told him about ground penetrating radar that they had done. And not, just to be clear, they did this not specifically because they were looking for the cask. They did this because of historical reasons. The Elizabethan Gardens is always building things and adding things to their edifices on their grounds. And so before they can break ground on any new thing in the gardens, they have to do a GPR. They have to bring in an archaeologist who can come in and tell them if it's okay what they're doing. So they've actually had a lot of experience of bringing GPR into the Elizabethan Gardens and scanning the ground to see what's there. And so he was involved in that, and he had told me a little bit about some of the things that they had done. They have scanned the area of the Watergate, for example. They have scanned a lot of different areas because of different things that they've been trying to do. And they are also keenly aware of The Secret and Byron Preiss's novel. They're keenly aware, but they've been aware of it for a very long time. They've been aware of it before the Expedition Unknown episode. And so, when they do these scans, they're looking to see, okay, is there anything that's aberrant, in there? So basically, he put me in contact with the executive director of the Elizabethan Gardens. And I started a conversation with him just asking, hey, what have you found from these scans? What is your current policy? And this is years ago. This is 3 years ago, at least 2 years ago, maybe. And this is before, I think the masses started descending on this area to try to really tear up the area. And he was telling me that they haven't found anything. They've scanned different areas, and they've kept an eye out for things like a buried cask and what have you. And I started just working with him, and I said, listen, I'm a resident of the state of North Carolina. The Elizabethan Gardens is beautiful. I have no interest in digging anywhere without authorization. I've spent time on the phone with several staff of the Elizabethan Gardens just explaining some of the theories I have about where it might be buried. And they actually know a ton about this puzzle. I wouldn't be surprised if there are staff members of the Elizabethan Gardens that are on these, our Facebook groups, who are listening to the chatter on this, because a lot of them want to see this cask found. They're very interested in it, and they love the attention that it brings. Although sometimes it brings bad, negative consequences. In general, I think they like the attention it brings to the gardens. So, I've spent some time just talking to them, and they know who I am, and, they understand that I'm not some Yahoo who's just looking to tear up their gardens. Instead, I'm just interested in trying to solve this and find it and exchange ideas about it. So I've actually gotten pretty far. I've gotten to the point where they actually brought a proposal to the full board of the Elizabethan Gardens to allow me to dig up the Watergate. And unfortunately, they declined my request. I offered to even make a donation, I would say a pretty good donation to the Elizabethan Gardens in return for the opportunity to dig up the Watergate, but they declined. And so that was pretty recent. That was about, a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, where they finally made a decision on that. That means the door is temporarily closed, but I don't think closed forever. I think there is a potential to, at some point, do some targeted digs. And like I said, they are constantly bringing people in to do GPR on the grounds of the Elizabethan Gardens. So if your solve for Roanoke involves the Elizabethan Gardens, chances are that they're going to be using GPR at least some point in the future to be able to, look underground. One last thing I'll just say, if any of you have not been to the Elizabethan Gardens in the last year or so, because of hurricane activity, the coastline has been significantly eroded. Right, the Watergate is basically in the Sound at this point, and the ground is so eroded that it's almost at the point where it's at the gazebo, which is at the colony wall. So yeah, if you guys, so for those of you who may not remember, there's a gazebo at the northern end of the Elizabethan Gardens, which was built using the same architecture and style and materials that the colonists would have had, and it was built almost at the exact same time that Byron Preiss buried the cask somewhere in that area, and so that gazebo is actually in danger because the erosion is so significant that it's literally feet outside of that gazebo where the ground has been eroded, right? So the next step is that the Elizabethan Gardens has to move the gazebo. They have to move it. And so when they move it, there might be enough opportunity to do some GPR and find out, what, because a lot of theories, there's some theories out there that think that the cask is buried near the gazebo.
Oh, yeah, we have a community member that is herself.
There's a very good, it's not bad. It's actually not a bad, it's not what I would consider the top three solutions, but there is a solution involving the gazebo that has credibility. And so there's an opportunity when they move that gazebo, and I don't know when they'll do it, but when they move it, there's an opportunity to maybe do something different and unique and really find out what's going on there. So
a little bit earlier, George had his confused face on, and I'm going to guess that it's a question that I have. Sure. I might be wrong, but you were talking about digging up the Watergate. What is there left to dig up?
Well, the Watergate is in the water, right? Basically, if you go to the, and I have a picture behind me, if you can kind of see or is that I have the Lost Colony Theater?
Yeah,
sorry, the Waterside Theater behind me. I have another one where I have the Watergate, but it's basically two columns of bricks, okay, right. And it's in the water, okay. Now, depending upon your solve, it could be possible that if your solve is the Watergate, that if you dug up the sand and the brick around the Watergate, that there's a chance the cask is there. And so what I was proposing is to basically use some machinery to take apart the Watergate, remove all the brick, and then just have an opportunity to be able to dig a few feet into the sand to see if the cask was there. It's a long shot, I understand there's been so much erosion that there's probably a good chance that the cask, if it was buried at the Watergate, is now in the Sound. But my suggestion was, look, your gate is in the water. You may as well just let me come in and take apart the Watergate, take those bricks out, and just see what's there. And it was pretty compelling. I mean, they listened to me in earnest, and I almost got there. But I think the board eventually just decided that they would just rather not do that. So they decided to decline. But, if you are a Watergate enthusiast, if you believe that the Watergate is the right solution, this was the last chance to sort of dig up all those bricks and look under it. I've called the National Park Service. The National Park Service has told me that the authority to dig up the Watergate rests with the Elizabethan Gardens. That's what they have told me.
Yep.
So if the Elizabethan Gardens were to say, yes, Ken, you can go dig up the Watergate, apparently that's okay with them. So
Chris Preacher made a comment that said the Elizabethan Gardens had no patience for his treasure hunting questions. They really didn't entertain mine either. They were pretty, they were standoffish with me. He also made the comment that the Fort Raleigh guys were great, and with me they were too. Yeah,
the Fort Raleigh Rangers are amazing. When my wife and I visited there the first time, we were looking at the headstone, the Virginia Dare headstone. That's not headstone, but the Virginia Dare Memorial
Monument. The Virginia Dare Monument. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. We were looking at that, and on the back of that, there's something carved into it. And so my wife and I noticed it, but we couldn't figure out what it said. So while we were in the actual visitor center, we brought that up to one of the rangers, and the ranger actually took the time to go in the back, go through the archives, found where somebody had done where you put the paper on there and with a pencil so you could, and photocopied it for us and brought it back out for us laminated. And I'm like, here you go. Nice. This is what it says. They're like, you guys are amazing.
That's awesome.
They've always had a great sense of humor. They've always just been super nice, super willing to help. And just overall great people.
My favorite was Ranger Byron. Did I tell you the story about Ranger Byron? So there's this guy, he's a seasonal guy. He normally works in like Colorado or whatever, but his name's Byron Preston, and he's a ranger down in the park, and he was giving me and Rachel a tour, and I think he kind of figured out who I was. because at some point, everything we stopped at, he would call it a treasure. He would be like, "This is the treasure of this park, this Virginia Dare statue, and let me lead you over here and show you." And he pointed at the ground, and he's like, "There's a treasure right here in the ground, and it's this monument for like it was nuts." But he was such a nice guy. Everybody there was super knowledgeable. So yeah, great.
Going back to, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, again, it depends on what your solution is. But if your solution involves the Watergate or it's the Elizabethan Garden, I would just say that they are very knowledgeable on the poem. They're very knowledgeable about the secret. They're interested in it. I think they genuinely would love to see it found because, frankly, it'd be a headache they don't have to worry about. You know, they've had some headaches from it. But I think my proposal was to basically take down the Watergate, and I think they decided that they just didn't want to do that. They just see it absorbed by the water. So
here's an interesting story. So when my wife and I went there, we were talking to them about, because the first time I visited, the Watergate was still there, but there's about 5 feet of erosion on either side of it. So if the cask was buried right at it, it's gone. But we talked to the head of the park while we were there. At least he introduced himself as the head of the park. I don't remember what his name is. Or the head of the gardens.
The gardens? The head of the gardens.
The head of the gardens, yeah. I don't remember what his name was now, but he introduced himself as the man in charge. And we asked him about it. We're like, what are you guys going to save this? This is, this thing is beautiful. Are you guys going to do something so it doesn't, go away? And he said, no, we're just going to literally just let it fall into the sound.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
So when he said that, I was like, oh, so they don't care. Great. So I thought it would be okay just to take a piece of it for our memory, because I absolutely love it. So I took a piece of it. Walking back to the car, well, you'd think. Walking back to the car, we were approached by a park ranger. And the park ranger's like, well, somebody called in and said that somebody was possibly carrying a artifact off of the grounds. Wow. And you're like, no, it's just a piece of the broken gate that's falling into the sound. And I spoke to the head of the gardens, and he said they're just going to let it fall in, so he didn't care. And the park ranger actually confiscated the piece and said that they're going to have to contact the Elizabethan Gardens, make sure it's okay, and he would call back if it was okay. They never called back.
Yeah, wow.
I never got a phone call. I don't know if anybody else did.
No. Yeah, I mean, it just goes to show you how crazy this whole area is. Just such a risky place to put a cask, right? It was such a tough thing. And I think one of the reasons why the Watergate is such a good solution, why a lot of people like it, is because it seems like it's the one area where maybe it's ambiguous enough that you could bury something and get away with it, and because it's on the beach, it's not quite, it's part of the Elizabethan Gardens, but also not quite because it's right on the beach. And then you got the National Park Service, which is like, well, that's Elizabethan Gardens. So it seems like in that whole area, it's the one place where maybe you could get away with burying something, And so I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people gravitate to the Watergate as one of the key solutions for this puzzle. Reality is, everybody's very paranoid about anybody putting a shovel in the ground anywhere in that area, whether it's on Elizabethan Garden property or National Park Service property. So, it doesn't surprise me that someone tracked you down there, Bradley.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. So let's get into the meat and potatoes. So I've talked to everybody about your guys' theories and thoughts, and we're all on the same page up until one very specific part of the verse. So I think we all agree, past two friends of Octave in December, it's talking about the Wright brothers. Now, some people think that in December is referring to Highway 12. Some people think it's referring to the date of the first flight. That's what camp I'm in. Then it says Ride the Man of Oz. I think we're all in agreement that's talking about the Washington Bomb Bridge. Bomb being the last name of the author of The Wizard of Oz. To the land near the window, there's a road that leads to Dark Forest. So the land near the window, like Bill was saying, look at the image. That's going to give you your, what I like to call your macro and your micro as far as where you're going. So that's letting you know, hey, here's this perfect outline of Roanoke Island next to a window. That's got to be the land near the window. So that's where we're going. We're taking the bridge over to Roanoke Island from the Outer Banks. And the road leads to Dark Forest. So I think everybody here agrees that that's referring to the dark forest line right outside the Elizabethan Gardens on the signage. We're whitest in color with 2 maps. The old sign for the Fort Raleigh Park when you're walking into the amphitheater. So there's for those who've never been there, there's 3 different ways you can walk into the Fort Raleigh Park. And one of them is a path as if you're going to go see the play. And there used to be a sign right there. And John White was the governor of the Lost Colony, and he's also a watercolor artist. And on that sign were 2 maps of the area and some of John White's watercolor work. After Circle and Square, now depending on who you talk to, you know what? Let me ask you guys that. I didn't actually cover that with you guys. What do you guys think the Circle and Square is?
Go ahead, Ken.
Well, you know, I think there's 2 options, right? There's the parking lot and the Circle Drive, which is what a lot of people believe it is. That's what's on the wiki. For those of you who are familiar with the wiki solutions, I think the other place that is a very strong contender is the Greater Lawn and the Sunken Gardens of the Elizabethan Gardens. So if you depending upon which, you know, I think both are reasonable. You know, it's clear that Byron Preiss looked at a lot of maps, and if you look at those maps, you can clearly see a circle at the in the Circle and Square within the Elizabethan Gardens. You can certainly see the Circle and Square in the parking lot area. So either of those 2, depending upon your preference, would work, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with the garden. I think it's absolutely the Sunken Garden in the Elizabethan Gardens, without a doubt.
Fair enough. Those are the 2 that I hear most often, and I can't disagree. I'm kind of in the same boat there. George, I think you're in the same boat. Am I wrong?
For the most part.
Okay, gotcha. So here's something to think about. So a couple of our community members have a baseball field that they like in the area, and I'm not opposed to the baseball theory because there are some hints. It could very well. I mean, if you're looking at first scene standing, the last touch. I mean, when you're playing baseball, where do you stand first, and what's the last thing you touch? Home plate, right? So we know the home plate from Boston, so that leads you right in that direction. So if you're talking about after Circle and Square, where are you standing before you go to home plate? If you're getting ready to bat, where are you standing? You're in the warm-up circle, right? There's a little circle there.
Oh, you're on
circle.
deck.
You're on deck, right? You're on deck in that little circle warming up. And then you go to the batter's box, the square, at home plate. So just something to throw out there. Just another out-of-the-box idea.
Bradley, we're all nerds, bro. We don't watch baseball.
Right.
Hey.
Sorry.
You never played
where do you stand before you bat? I don't know, man.
George, baseball is for drinking beer. You don't watch the game.
I stand at the beer
and
stand.
Have fun with your friends. Yes, at the beer stand, exactly. But there's another idea for Circle and Square. Just since we want to encourage out of the box thinking, in July and August. So there's a couple different theories for July and August. It could be what we were talking about earlier, the Virginia Madera Memorial. It's got the words right there, July and August. It could be the theater, right? Right on the sign outside the theater. Well, it used to be. I don't think it's there anymore. It would say when the play was each year, and that said July and August. So we've got 2 signs in the park that say July and August. A path beckons to Micah and Driftwood.
Right.
Micah, if you guys aren't familiar with the area, Micah is just a really shiny mineral, and it's very. There's a lot of it in North Carolina. Everywhere. Here in the mountains, if you go hiking, you're gonna see little shiny rocks, and it's got a lot of mica in it. Same thing with the sand in North Carolina beaches. It glistens in the moonlight because it has a lot of mica in it. So what else do you find at the beach? Driftwood, right? You don't find driftwood anywhere but the beach, obviously, unless, of course, it's floating in the water. There's actually some people who think you have to go out into the sound to find the cask. It's somehow buried in the sound, which is interesting to me. But so path beckons to Micah and Driftwood. There's a bass somewhere that takes you to a beach, right? So that Ken was talking about earlier, the Watergate, right? That's a path. The Colony Walk leads you to Micah and Driftwood. There's the Harriet Trail, which is a really popular idea. It leads you to 3 different paths on the beach, I think. That could be Micah and Driftwood. And then we lose it, right? Then everybody's running in opposite directions. Nobody knows what we're talking about after that. So we have Under, which may be last touched, our first scene standing. Look north at the Wing and Dig to achieve by Dauntless and inconquerable determination, your goal.
Yes.
Right. So this is where it all gets crazy. So, Bill, why don't you talk about the rest of that for us and where that takes you and why it takes you there?
Sure. Absolutely. So I'm a firm believer. I don't believe for a second Byron buried this cask anywhere near the beach or on sand. Nowhere near it. I don't. I think he was smart enough. He knew better than that. This was a guy that researched those areas meticulously. He would have taken into account the hurricanes, weather, stuff like that, erosion. I don't think he put it anywhere near the beach. And I'm of the opinion he didn't go into the garden because I think that's kind of like walking that fine line of violating being buried in a flower bed. I don't think he would have gone into the Elizabethan gardens and buried it there. I think he wanted you to go there. He wanted you to see it. If you look at the painting, there's a lot of elements from the garden all in there. But I believe that he takes you back to the Wright Brothers Memorial there at the end. Yep. I know, George. I know. I knew you were going to do that. I knew it. And I know it's not a very popular opinion, okay? But when I look at the painting, okay, and the verse, there's too much of the Wright brothers there. That painting, just from afar, screams a lot to do with the airplanes. You've got the arms of the statue out to the side. Okay, when you're a kid, you're pretending to fly, you put your arms out to the side. The brackets under, or the braces under the arms, to me, kind of remind me of the Wright brothers flyer. We can go on and on and on about the head. So you've got the nostrils of the horse, okay, the horns, everything there, Nag's head, Kill Devil's Hill, the horns being Kill Devil Hills. But then you've got the plane. The eyes are from a plane. And then the helmet, the wings coming out to the side. There's too much there that is just screaming the Wright brothers to me, and flight. Just too many flight themes.
So if you're in the Wright brothers camp, something you didn't mention that a lot of people like is on the helmet, right in between his eyes, going up straight, and including his eyes, kind of resembles the Wright brothers monument as well.
Oh, yeah.
So if you look at that, that kind of looks like you're looking at the Wright brothers monument.
And then, also the helmet as well. Sorry, Bradley, but if you look at an aerial shot of the wing, the monument of the wing, you'll notice it kind of resembles, and this is a bit of a stretch. It is a bit of a stretch. Kind of resembles a little bit of the helmet with the points. It's round, and you have the different points coming off the monument.
Right.
So to me, I see a little bit of the resemblance there. So
now, also right behind the helmet in the sky, you have the large circle, kind of the halo, right? And then you have the center point. And that fits exactly an aerial view of how the Wright brothers monument looks up on it. So if you haven't been there before, guys, the Wright brothers monument is up on a giant hill, and it's got a circular drive around it. So when you look at a map of the Wright brothers monument, that's exactly what you see. You see a big halo around a center point. So that's very reminiscent of the Wright brothers monument as well. George?
Yeah, it's a pretty picture. I'll give you that. It's got a lot of stuff in it. It's really pretty. Here's the question I ask everybody that does the Wright brothers. Right. No one's ever been able to answer it, and you absolutely have to be able to answer it to get me on your team here. Byron spends 15 lines of this verse, taking you from arguably the Wright brothers monument 10 miles away, over a bridge, 5 miles to the right, down another road, to a completely different road, up that road into a park, past a monument. You're looking for a path, and then all of a sudden you have to transport yourself back to a monument where you have to look north at it and dig in some random place that is not defined in the verse.
It is. And I'm going to even give you a dig icon. Okay? The reason I think it's the Wright brothers, he starts at the memorial.
I don't want a dig icon. Here's what I want. I want to know why Byron took 15 verses to take you on this very specific route into a very specific park to find a very specific path, and then expect you to teleport yourself 15 miles away without telling you to do it and find a place to dig, without telling you where it is.
I believe he does tell you to do it. He spends about almost 25% of the puzzle talking about the memorial. He starts off with the Wright brothers. He ends with the Wright brothers. He talks about the wing. And then he takes the quote off the wing. Now, arguably, that could just be a beautiful piece of poetry and everything. I've heard you talk a lot about that, George. Sometimes he uses it as a beautiful piece of poetry. But here, the fact he starts and ends the poem or the verse with the Wright brothers, and there's so much screaming Wright brothers to me in that painting that I find it hard to believe. To me, he wants you to go back there.
I don't think it's just a beautiful piece of poetry, man. I've sat on Roanoke.
No, I'm just saying there's some.
I've looked north at the wing, and I wouldn't be able to tell what it was unless you defined exactly what this wing is. I mean, it's a mile away. Like you can see the light flashing on top of it. That's it. Unless you tell me what that wing is I'm looking for, I won't know. And I think that's what that quote is trying to tell you to do. Look north at the wing. Oh, yeah, it's the Wright brothers' wing. Look north at that.
So let me
wait.
give you.
Hold on. I'm interested, Bill. You said you had a dig icon, and I want to give you every opportunity. So what's the dig icon?
Okay. So when you take a look at the aerial view of the Wright brother memorial, you already touched on it, Bradley. Okay. Going around the wing monument is a circle, okay? Then coming on, look at it, pull it up now. Tell me, what does that look like? You have that round path going around it, then you have the drive coming off of it, and then the airport runway right next to it. Now look at the painting. If you're looking at the painting, it's going to be on our left, but it is the statue's right arm. Look at the key hanging off of that arm. I say that the larger key is an outline of that path around the memorial. The key coming off of it is the road going towards, I guess, what would be the ticket box office. And then I'm even saying that the string that's coming down, that's holding the bubble with the flower in it, could even be the airport runway. Or if you just look at the airport runway itself, it almost looks like a component of that key. Look at to me, there's similarities there. And then, more importantly, here's the dig icon for me. What's at the end of that key in the painting? Look at that. To me, it sticks out. It's like a sore thumb. Look at that. There's this like little shape there. And I say that's the first monument there, where the first successful flight of an airplane monument. It's the identical shape. The key is pointing you to the key.
So you're saying so if you go to the Wright Brothers Memorial, guys, there are 3 markers for each attempted flight, and where those flights landed. So there's a 1, 2, and 3. So you're saying it's at the number 1 spot.
Well, there's 4 monuments. There's the one.
Oh, sorry. Okay. 4.
Yeah, the first successful flight. That's me. That's where I'm at. I think it's there. I think that spot, that little crack, okay, it's this little crack like this. That's right there at the tip of that key. That's the monument. And then look at the monument. If you were to pull up that monument, the plaque, what color is the plaque? It's that same bronze color. That's the color of the armor. And then if you look at that plaque, you'll notice it's got curly brackets on it, okay? Those curly brackets are very similar, if not one of them's almost identical to the style of the brackets going down the center of the armor, okay? You look at the center of the armor, you've got those 2 brackets coming down the side that point right to the gem. Those, to me, are the curly brackets off of that plaque. So the color of the plaque matches. You've got the curly brackets. And also, I interpret, let's see, last touch, first seen standing. That's the last place Orville touched. Or, I'm sorry, that's the last place he touched, and was the last place he was seen standing.
Yeah, and the wing is south of you. So there's.
It's just you're still looking north though from Roanoke. It's a stretch, George. I know it's a stretch.
Yeah.
And that's what I want you to do. I want you to challenge me because I know you push people, and that's what I want you to do.
Oh, I'll push.
Here's my question about your dig site, your dig confirmer in the image. So let's look at going back to what we were talking about earlier, using the solved puzzles as a reference point and how we can use those to help us solve ones that are unsolved. Right. So when we look at Chicago, right? So our dig point image on that is going to be our fence and fixture, right? They're super obvious. We look at Cleveland, right? Our dig point, our dig spot is painted super obvious. The planter's right there in the painting. Right. We look at Cleveland. There's a home plate that
Boston.
After the fact is super obvious. After the fact is super obvious. But it's definitely a home plate. There's no question about it. What I think you're indicating in this image as a reference to that plaque or that monument for the first landing is not a prominent. It's like a blurb in the painting. It's just a small, not even detail, just something to add texture to the painting, in my opinion. So I have a really hard time taking that as a dig spot. And also, if you look at the circle that the key is hanging on that you're referencing, that is a perfect match for a part of the map of the Elizabethan Gardens.
Really?
Yes.
I think, and I believe that there are elements within the painting, small details that are attributed to the gardens and the Lost Colony. But I think the overall painting still takes you right back to the Wright Brothers Memorial. And again, when you stand there, though, and this is one of the most important things that you guys have talked about, and I agree, when you stand there at the dig spot, it all has to come together. And this is the one here, and I'm going to shoot myself in the foot, but...
Well, it doesn't really all come together.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't, but I feel really strongly about that, the key and just the overall imagery attributing to the Wright Brothers Memorial. I don't think that Palancar put all of that in there just for you to figure out that you had to, pass the two friends of octave. Right. You could have done that with a lot less, but there's so much that just screams.
So let me tell you my opinion on this. In the Wright Brothers Memorial is a credible solution. Let me just acknowledge that. I don't put it in the first three. I don't put it in the top three. I would put it in the top five. And I can understand the logic behind it. Here's the thing, okay? The problem with this image is there is so much in it. And I mean, George, probably you're more of an expert on this than I am, but there's probably more stuff in this image than maybe any other image in all of the 12. There's just a ton going on in this picture. And, yes, you can find there are attributions to the Wright Brothers Memorial in here. There's the runway, which is one of the fronds coming out of the red skirt of the knight. There's potentially the gates. The flyer that you mentioned, the hands extended, and the supports for the flyer potentially is also one. And there's these references that clearly refer to the Wright Brothers Memorial, and I think there's obviously the reference in the poem, but more references in the image and the poem refer to the area of the Elizabethan Gardens than anywhere else by far. So what I would say is, yes, there are references to the Wright Brothers Memorial, but where is the confluence of the imagery? Where are most of the clues pointing? Most of them are pointing to the area of the Elizabethan Gardens by far. I mean, and I could go through. I mean, there's 60, 70 different clues in the image. The majority by far it isn't even close. Refer to the area around the Elizabethan Gardens. Let me just take one example because you mentioned one. Let's look at the belt. Let's look at the belt of the knight here. Okay. You see how the belt comes in and then it goes down and then you have the gem, right? And so I don't think we have that on the screen, but everybody's seen the image. If you flip that upside down, that's actually the entrance of the Elizabethan Gardens. Okay, there's no question that's what it is.
There's question. Let me ask you this. We're talking a lot about image matches here, and we're all saying there's a lot of image matches to this, and there's a lot of image matches to this, and it's sort of misleading to people who don't know this puzzle very well. Let me ask you this: is there a fence post image match in this painting? Is there anything that is as exact as that fence post, or anything that is exact as those columns or that planter?
Sure, I think for some solutions there are, but if you take the Watergate, I mean, you could look behind the night. I mean, look at the columns there. I mean, you could say, hey, that's the Watergate.
I mean, you could say that, but is it as exact as those fence posts?
That's pretty exact to me. I mean, that's pretty exact to me. Those are the columns of the Watergate. But I just want to go back to the belt. I mean, you can disagree, George, but you take that belt, you flip it upside down. That is the entrance to the Elizabethan Gardens. I mean, match it up. Palancar has talked about Palancar's imagery was not meant to be exact, okay? He was artistically styling this, right? He was putting his own artistic impressions on things. So if you expect it to be an exact image, you're always going to be disappointed in any of the images, right?
Well,
but
no, because the fence post with the halo was exact.
That was exact.
You put it next to a picture of the painting. Yeah, it's exact.
I believe it was exact.
My point is, it's not a photocopy, right? It's not a photocopy. So there's going to be some artistic, subjectivity that puts into it. But it's so clear. You look at the entrance way to the Elizabethan Gardens. That is exactly what that is. I mean, it is a wall that extends, just like the belt is extending. It's a door in the middle. Above the door is a circular emblem. It's a logo of I think something English related, I'm sure. It's very clear to me. And I think that if you just go through all the images, I believe I can tell you almost exactly everything in this image. I can, of course, it's opinion because I don't have a cask in my hand, but I believe I can tell you just about everything in this image where it comes from. And the vast majority of it is pointing to the area around the Elizabethan Gardens, no question.
We have a community member, and I'm really sorry I do not remember your name. You know who you are. That has actually made a really great breakdown of a lot of the proposed references of the image. Mm-hmm. One of the great charts that our community members have made and share, when occasion is appropriate. And I don't know if that's on there, but I see what you're saying, and I've seen that before, and I don't disagree. It's very, very similar. Exact, no, but it's very similar to the top of the entrance to not to the gardens, but to the building that you go through to pay for your ticket and walk through, which wasn't always the entrance to the gardens. You used to go through the large gate that's now permanently closed.
The Great Gate, yeah.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the skeleton key, because you mentioned the skeleton key. There's two skeleton keys that are hanging from the outstretched arms of the knight in the puzzle.
There's three.
Right? You mentioned one of them. I'm sorry, there's three?
There's three. Yeah, so the big circle that Bill was referencing.
Yep.
Do you see the large key? Mm-hmm. There's a smaller key to the right of that.
Yeah.
I can't tell you why I know that, but I do know that.
I don't know if that's a key, but I noticed it too, yeah.
I mean,
it is a key.
Everybody's seen
it's
the
a key.
So
I don't know what you're talking about. I've never seen anything
what are you referring
to what's in the book.
I don't see another key. There's two keys. There's one on the left and the right. Where's the other key?
I'll shoot you. It's there.
So it's so you've got the circle that key's hanging off of, right? That Bill was talking to. There's a second key on that hoop. It's very hard to see in the book image, but if you've seen the leaked photos of the painting, it's there. A key. I mean, there's a second key hanging to the right of that key.
May or may not be a key, but it's pretty close.
But there's something there.
Yeah, there's something
definitely there.
Yeah.
Okay, I see what you're referring to. I see there is a little notch there. I don't know if that's a key. But the way I interpret the keys is there are two gates to the Elizabethan Gardens, guys. There's two. There's the Great Gate and there's the Watergate. It's very clear. They're key landmarks. To me, those two gate keys, the skeleton keys, are referring to those two gates. And if you're going to say that your solution is, hey, let's take one of these keys and the solve is that it's in the shape of one of these keys, well, explain the other key. There's 2 keys listed there. And why would there be 2 keys? Well, the most obvious choice is that there's 2 gates. Where are there 2 gates? No, there's no other place where there's 2 gates like this than in the Elizabethan Gardens. The Great Gate.
There's 2 gates at my house. That doesn't mean the
But-
cask
but-
is
but
buried
they're
at my house.
Exactly, that's true, George. But there's 2 prominent parts of the Elizabethan Gardens: the Great Gate and the Water Gate. That's it. There's nothing else. So those 2 gate keys most obviously point to those 2 gates.
So here's a theory I've heard about the keys that I really like, and it's a lot more simple, and it's another reason why I like it. So people hear the term Florida keys, and they know what I'm talking about. It's a string of islands, right?
Right.
So if you understand what keys are, and you see 2 keys, you have keys. What are you looking for? You're looking for a string of islands. What is that? The Outer Banks. They're not referred to as the keys like people would say the Florida Keys, but that's what keys are. They're a string of islands. So it could be referencing just, hey, we're looking for somewhere where there's a string of islands. Well, okay. He has his hands extending past the border of the image. He's out of the banks. Oh, we're looking at the Outer Banks. Okay, great.
Okay. Yeah, I hear you. I hear
something
you.
I've heard.
I hear you. But guys, there's 2 key aspects. There's 2 key landmarks in the area here. It's the Elizabethan Gardens, and there are 2 gates there. And there's 2 gate keys.
I don't disagree. I've discussed that before, and I like it.
Look, again, I can't say for fact, but you have 2 prominent features in the Elizabethan Gardens. They happen to be gates. There's 2 gate keys. It's pretty clear to me. I can't think of a simpler solution. So
let me ask you guys about this. So in the bottom right of the image, there's a spoon, right? Everybody's seen the spoon. Everybody's seen the pea in the spoon.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, Bill, what is that to you?
Isn't that road right there? What is it? Parapad Road or something like, or Pierpad, whatever it is?
Parapad Road.
Parapad Road.
So that's what a lot of people think. But what I'm curious is from your viewpoint. So your viewpoint is that you're going straight to Fort Raleigh. You're going down the path. You see the wing, and you're like, "Oh, I need to be there." And then you go back to the monument.
Right.
But at no point would you take Parapad Road to do that. You wouldn't even know Parapad Road existed, to be perfectly honest, if you took that path. So why do you think that would be in the image?
Maybe that's something that you may come across while you're exploring the area. I don't think it's going out on a limb to saying that, Byron wanted you to explore. Some of this was just for the thrill of the hunt, to go out there, to explore these parks, to just, explore the areas that he was, sending you to. So maybe that was just another, I don't know if I want to call it a site confirmer or anything, but just something to confirm, if you saw, oh, hey, there's Parapad Road.
I'll help you out with this one, Bradley.
Okay.
It's not a stretch of the imagination to say if Byron's going to take you from the Wright Brothers Monument to the Elizabethan Gardens to look at a monument, like to look at that sign, the Dark Forest sign, that he's going to put Parapad Road in there to be like, you got to pass Parapad Road. Like I'm reaching here, but I feel like it's sort of stretchy. I'm just trying to help. That's what I'm trying to help. That's the.
So here's more help. So another way you can follow a path to Micah and Driftwood is to take Parapad Road and to walk. There used to be a parking area down there where you would go to the beach.
Yeah.
And you walk down to the beach and you look north to the wing.
Yeah, there was a fence down there. We found pictures of that, right? There was a fence that ran across everything.
Area. There was a fence.
You're talking about down by the graveyard.
Past the graveyard.
Past the graveyard.
Past the graveyard. Yeah.
That used to be a key recreational point where people would park and go out to the beach.
Mm-hmm.
So even following your theory, I'm just spitballing here, but just to follow your theory, Bill. Bill froze. Bill, you still with us?
Oh
no.
Did Bill get mad? Bill didn't get mad, did he?
No, I don't think so. No.
I hope not.
No, he's a good sport. And, he might be right and prove us all wrong. Who knows? But, that might be a reason. Oh, I think, is that Bill calling back?
I don't know. Let me check.
So why he's checking on that?
You guys can keep talking.
So why he's checking on that. So that may be why that's there. It may, if you're following Bill's theory, you go to the end there and you walk out to the beach, Mike and Driftwood, you look north to the wing and you know that you need to go back. Who knows? I don't know. We haven't found it. So, but what I would love to find out is in the bottom right, attached to the spoon, is a little shape. A lot of people say it's a pear. It could be a pear. But now that we've seen the original painting, there's like a little smiley face. There's a little guy wearing glasses, I think. Is that JJP throwing himself into the painting just for kicks and giggles? Is that because we know he hides things in his actual artwork? I don't want to, because we have, we'll say, tushes and ding dongs. Yeah, he likes to hide those in his paintings, in his actual paintings. It's absolutely hilarious. When George and I went to see his show in Canton Museum of Arts, Kit pointed that out in one of my favorite paintings. Didn't ruin it for me. I still love the painting. It's called Becoming Human. But he's like, did you notice? And it's like, I didn't notice that, but now I do. And now I can't look at that without noticing that. Thanks, Kit. But maybe he was just throwing that in there just for kicks and giggles. Who knows? But I would love to know what that's supposed to be.
Bill got mad at me and left. No, not really. He had a thunderstorm at his house and they lost power. So.
No!
Ouch.
Okay.
So he apologized. Sorry.
Bill, that is the Almighty saying it is not at the
Yeah, it's not on the right.
the Wright Brothers Memorial. Sorry,
I agree with that one.
When your plug gets pulled that way, it's a higher force letting you know. No,
He was like, I'm not mad. I wanted you to push me, and I was like, well, I'll do that.
No, Bill, you're a great sport, man, and I really appreciate you joining in and
thank you.
Start doing whatever you need to do so your food doesn't spoil in the fridge. Yeah. That's always the worst if you lose power for too long.
So now we're talking about the Elizabethan Gardens, right? So I have to turn all of my rage against Ken here.
Sure, go for it.
You're right. You're 100% right. You're 100% right, Ken. All of the clues in this verse lead you to stuff around the Elizabethan Gardens, and not in the Elizabethan Gardens, around it in Fort Raleigh.
Well, what I would say is that I think there's three good solutions. I think one of them is solidly within the Elizabethan Gardens. I think one of them is on the outskirts of the Elizabethan Gardens, and the other one is on NPS land that is at the tail end of the Harriot Trail. And those are my three top solutions. I think there is a solution for the Wright Brothers Memorial. Like I said, it's in the top 5. I think there's also a solution for the Waterside Theater. But I would put those 4 and 5. I think the 3 top solutions are Watergate, the Virginia Dare statue, which is in the Elizabethan Gardens, and at the overlook at the end of the Harriot Trail. Those are the top 3 in my opinion.
So, George, am I wrong that the Virginia Dare statue has been pretty much dug
to death?
To death, yeah.
To death, dug to death. Leave it alone.
No, and I've read accounts of some digs around the Dare statue. It's actually, in my opinion, a little bit away from the statue, and I think it's actually behind the So if you guys have looked at the statue, first of all. And I don't want to turn this. I mean, I could tell you the whole solution for the Virginia Dare statue, why it's a good solution. But behind the Virginia Dare statue is an ancient oak tree. Okay, and the operative verse that tells you where to dig is under that which was last touched and first seen standing. Right, a tree is a great fit for that. That tree behind the Virginia Dare statue is an iconic tree. It's been there since the gardens opened. It's a very old tree. And there are markers that would suggest that you would dig around that tree and not necessarily right in front of the statue. So depending upon where the digs occurred, you might not be at the right location. I do think there's a case to be made there. But if I were to list the top 3 solutions, the Virginia Dare solution to me is like number 3. I think Watergate's the easiest one to come to a conclusion on. But I do think, to me, I'll tell you, if I were, if my wishes could come true, I think the most elegant solution is the Virginia Dare statue. I have a lot of reasons why I believe that, but I think it's the best, the most poetic one.
It'd be great if the verse told you to look north at the woods and dig, but it doesn't. It says look north at the wing.
Well, let me explain that, George. So if you look at the Virginia Dare statue, what do you notice at the base of the statue? Have you looked at the bottom? What's at the bottom of Virginia Dare's feet? What's at her feet?
Okay, yeah, all right. So we're going to look at the crane?
Oh, hey!
No, it's not a crane. Stop. It's not a crane. It's a royal heron. And what do you see in the royal heron? There is a wing. That's basically the only thing you can see on the base of the Virginia Dare statue. Look at this. Look at the painting. If you look at the painting, the base of the knight in the painting is effectively, with some artistic liberties taken, it's the exact same as the base of the Virginia Dare statue, in my opinion. It's not an identical match, but it's very, very, very close to the actual base of the Virginia Dare statue. At the base of Virginia Dare's feet is the royal heron, and the heron has, what you can see of the heron is its wing. And so an interpretation of the operative verse, which is look north at the wing, would be at the wing, look north. Instead of look north at the wing, look north. Let me also add one other thing here. So you notice the line that comes after. Actually, let me get on my screen. I can quote the exact poem. If you look at the poem that says, to achieve by dauntless and incomparable determination.
I put you live again, Bill, by the way.
Hey, Bill.
Yeah.
Should I?
Right as I was pushing my girlfriend out of the shot.
Are you like in candlelight right now, or?
He's got like a flashlight, like he's gonna tell us a scary story.
We are not that important. I promise.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, Bill, sorry you got cut off there. So you're talking about the line right after that.
Oh, jeez.
I'm sorry, Ken. You were talking about the line right after that.
What I was going to say is, let's go to the phrase in the poem that says, "By dauntless and inconquerable." Okay, it says, "By dauntless and inconquerable," and the next line is determination. So, why is the author including this in the poem? Right, the Webster definition of dare is what? It's to be sufficiently courageous, and it's very analogous to the definition of dauntless. So I would say the verse is a direct reference, actually, to the Virginia Dare statute. Even more compelling is the word by, because it says by dauntless and inconquerable. So that basically, I think the author could be telling you to dig by the statute of Virginia Dare. I think it's actually a useful interpretation. And so, I noticed a lot of people talk about idea that, hey, the spelling of inconquerable doesn't match what's on the Wright Brothers Memorial, right? It's unconquerable versus inconquerable. And, one explanation for why Byron Preiss might actually do something like that would be because he's trying to convey a hint, and the hint is that the phrase is not so much about the Wright brothers, but in fact, because inconquerable is not even a word. So, if you ignore that word, it's really all about dauntless, and dauntless is most closely analogous to daring or dare. So another way to look at this is to achieve by the dare statute, your goal. And so you'll notice, and I mentioned this earlier, George said that there's really no good dig spot in this poem. It doesn't tell you exactly where to dig. It just says under something. That's all it says.
Yeah, but just because we don't understand what last touch and first thing standing is doesn't mean that the verse doesn't give you a good dig spot. It may give you a perfect dig spot. It may give you one to an inch, but we don't understand what it is.
Well, we know that if you're off by an inch, you're off by a mile. It doesn't give you a specific dig location. It just says it's under something. That's it. That's all it says.
Yeah,
So
but if you didn't understand Chicago at the end of 10 by 13 fence and and fixtures, you wouldn't think that gives you a specific dig spot either.
Understood. So you have to come up with a dig spot, right? So how do you come up with a dig spot? It's not in the poem. You have to look at the image and the poem together to come up with the dig spot, because the poem does not give you a specific location. It just says look under something, right? So you notice there's a line here in the poem. It says determination. Determination is its own line in the poem. What is determination? Determination is to determine the spot. He's asking you to, figure out the spot, determine the spot somehow based on what I provided you, I think, in the image. I actually think that's what he's referring to there. So in the dare solution, and like I said, this is my third best solution. I think the Watergate's a better solution, but I do love the Virginia Dare statute solution. He's saying to achieve by the Virginia statute, by determination, you have to figure out a way to determine the exact dig spot to get you your goal, which is the cask. So, again, you can say it's not correct, what have you, and understood, but there's so much imagery here that fits with the Virginia Dare statute. And if you're going to choose a book, if you're going to make a book that's all about immigration, right, at the end of the day, that, which people purport to say that the book is about immigration, who's a better subject than Virginia Dare, right? Who is purported to be the first English, person born on the soil of the United States of America. It really works in a very poetic way. Yeah. So
I'll say this in response to something you said, completely unrelated to the puzzle, where you said, I could say you're wrong. I'm not going to do that. I don't know. I don't know any more about these than you know, right? I'm not an expert. You could be right, I guess. I just, I don't know. I guess this is what this discussion's about. There's just things I don't understand. Like in this verse, we're all of a sudden we're changing words around, and we're changing words to mean not exactly what the verse says. I mean, the verse is pretty descriptive.
Right.
Like
it's
I said,
not keeping it simple.
Yeah, it's not keeping it simple.
Simple.
I
actually
there's a
I
lot
would
of play
argue
on
that
words
picking at
in the
this-
other puzzles. There's a lot of play on words in the other puzzles, and I will say I really like the idea of reading that line differently, the way you just read it, as far as look north at the wing. That could easily be read. Just it's a clever way of saying, okay, you're at the wing, look north.
Look north.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
I don't
It's a double
like.
entendre.
I don't like.
You're looking at the Wright
ignore-
Brothers Memorial
Yeah.
wing, and you're looking at a point where there's a wing nearby. Right.
Exactly. So I like that line of thinking. That's very creative and it's very plausible. What I don't like is ignore the word inconquerable. I don't, and I am 100% okay with the idea of, and who am I to tell people what to think here? I know less than most people do, and that's perfectly okay. But I love just discussing these, and I like how he closes out other puzzles like Chicago with just like a little fun little line, right? This is just let's close this out and make it enjoyable, and this sounds great. And like hush, right? So so I don't think that you can just throw out Inconquerable. Now, yes, it may just be this is a nice. I saw this on the Wright Brothers Memorial while I was looking for where I wanted to bury this cask, and I wanted to make sure I put that in the verse, and that's why I put it there. But I don't think we can just throw out words of the verse and just completely ignore it.
Yeah, I think you're right, Bradley. But I would also just say that isn't it interesting that another word for daring is dauntless?
Oh yeah, 100%. No, I like that
Isn't
too.
that interesting?
I love that as
And the
well.
Virginia Dare statue is right there in the Elizabethan Gardens. It's near the It's near the Watergate. So if you believe the Watergate is your answer, you're by the Dare statue. You are literally by Dauntless, And if you believe the Virginia Dare statue is the dig location, then you are literally right there by Dauntless. I think it's interesting.
Isn't it interesting that another word for path is trail? And then right as you pass the Virginia Dare Monument in Fort Raleigh that actually says the words July and August, you find the only actual trail.
The Harriot Trail.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like I said, I have said that I think one of the top three solutions is at the end of the Harriot Trail. And in fact, actually, I would argue the Harriot Trail is depicted in the image. If you go to if you look at the image and you go to and you go to where the outline of Roanoke is, so if you're looking at the image, it's on the right side. And basically where the elbow of the knight would be, if you look down, you'll see the island of Roanoke. And if you look, there happens to be a crack right where the fort and where the Elizabethan Gardens is. You guys see that? There's a crack right there. So he's literally telling you this is where on Roanoke you need to go, right?
Well, I'll give you one. Go ahead.
Yeah, if you just go right from there, if you go to the right, and you look to the right, and you go past the skeleton key that's hanging there.
Yes.
You'll see that there's another sort of an outline of a loop there.
Yes.
Right. That loop might very well be the Harriot Trail. And if it is,
it's the exact match of the old map.
And
it's not a might. That is the Harriet Trail.
And look at where the crack is. At the end of the Harriet Trail, there's another line there. So maybe what he's telling you is, go to the overlook, go to the end of the Harriet Trail, and that's where you're going to find something of interest. So I do think the Harriet Trail is a very compelling solution. In fact, actually, I think, Bradley, do you have a picture of the old sign that was in front of the Harriet Trail?
Yes.
If you look at that sign, the old sign, it's not there now. If you look at that sign, the sign to me actually says mica and driftwood. It doesn't use those words, but it says, what does it say? It says dunes and trees, something like that. So it's like, it almost tells you follow this trail because this is where the mica and driftwood is, but it doesn't actually use the for words mica and driftwood. So that old sign, which I believe was there when Byron Preiss buried the cask, I think is clearly, in the Harriot Trail solution, is really clearly telling you to take the Harriot Trail. So,
I think George is talking, but I don't hear it.
Someone in chat has just informed us that we're using the wrong verse, and that reminded me that I need something really bad. So I'm gonna go grab that, but I'll be right back. But keep talking.
Right.
And,
So Ken, real quick. So I missed a portion of this. Can you give me what's your dig icon? What's your dig icon in the painting?
Well, for which solution? I believe there's 3 good solutions outside of what you mentioned, Bill, of the Wright Brothers Memorial. I believe in the Virginia Dare statue, the Watergate, and the Harriot Trail.
Okay. So give me the Watergate one.
For the Watergate, if you look behind the knight, you can see the columns of the Watergate, in my opinion. So to me, that's a pretty clear dig mark.
Well, and also with the Watergate, if you're looking at imagery, right underneath the knight, what Ken was talking about earlier, I think, Bill, you were disconnected at the time, right. But Ken was referencing the what's underneath the knight as being similar to the Virginia Dare base.
Right.
I think it looks a lot like the little ball and the little ornaments that are on top of the Watergate columns.
Mm-hmm. It's a stretch to me that he put it anywhere near that Watergate. It's just the beach. I just don't.
Well, so I don't know, Bill. Bill, you vacationed there a lot whenever you were younger.
Mm-hmm.
Did you guys go out to the Watergate whenever back in the day?
Mm-hmm. No, not that I recall.
So the Watergate. The reason I ask is the Watergate. If you look at old pictures of it. It was nowhere near. I mean, it was near the water, but it was not what you would think if you saw something today. You could actually walk out the gate, walk down the steps. Walk out past grass, and then get to the beach, and then go to the water.
And actually, Bradley, another marker for the Watergate, besides the columns that are beside, on the other end of the knight, is the yucca plants.
Yes.
Right. So if you look at the skirt of the knight, the red skirt, to me, if you walk around the area of the Outer Banks, what you're going to find is there's yucca plants everywhere. Okay. And they're not red, they're green. But the English wore these, there's a word for it, and I'm forgetting it right now, but they wore these red, pantaloons, these red pants. That was very, common of the Elizabethan era, right, of the English. And so I actually think this whole image is a merge between the natives and the English that came into the area of Roanoke when they settled. So if you look at that skirt on the knight, I believe it's a yucca plant, even though it's red, I think, as a nod to the English. But I think those are yucca plants. And if you look at just about every picture of the Watergate, there are yucca plants prominently
all over the place,
nearby.
Here's one even better for you. On the Harriet Trail, there used to be a little sign telling you all about yucca plants. It was just a yucca plant sign on the Harriet Trail. I have a picture of that somewhere too.
Yeah. So I do think the Watergate I think it's the top solution. And look at the last line. It says your goal. What is a goal? Think of a soccer goal, right?
You're not keeping. Yeah, it's just not keeping it simple anymore. You're reading. I think there's just too much being read into it that somebody in Byron's demographic wouldn't have thought to look into and to see those things. I think we're taking just what was more. We have to take and separate out the noise or just what's just art and look for what we're really meant to see. And I agree, there's a lot of detail here, but I see people reading way too much into this.
So
here's too much.
Here's my theory. I know nobody asked, but I'm going to tell you.
Yeah.
To the left of the fairy, we'll call him the fairy holding the flower. To the left of the fairy, kind of where his stomach is pointing, Some people think that's a cross for like a grave marker. Some people think that's the number 4 and then the letter T for fort. Recently, some people think that that's actually like a person, and that's like his left shoulder and his arm and his head's up there with his nose and his mouth. This is what I think, and George completely disagrees with me, and that's okay. But because trees change, right? And we hate using trees as markers. No. But I have an exact match of a tree that I found watching a documentary of Fort Raleigh that was filmed in 1980 or 1981, whichever year it was, that's at the end of the Harriet Trail that matches that outline to the left of that cross exactly. And I will share that side by side, and especially if you've seen the leaked full painting, it's an exact match, and it's in the exact right spot according to the verse. Yeah. And I'll post that on Facebook later tonight so everybody can see it. That's my big side.
Bradley, Byron Preiss was not against using trees. Look at Chicago. Look at St. Augustine. He was using trees in his psalms. So you're not. I don't think you're out of bounds by saying, "Hey, there's a tree that just looks like something in the image." I don't think you're out of bounds with that.
Perfect match.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bradley, I'm very disappointed in you.
Disappointed, yeah. I agree.
I
agree with using trees in the verses, but I don't think that Palancar and Byron would have done that in the painting because trees change, and Byron I think was smart enough to know that.
I have nothing against Byron Preiss. I have nothing against his level of intelligence. He was a genius. He was an incredibly smart man. But you made some comments earlier about it's not going to be anywhere near the beach. He was smarter than that. He did a lot of research for that area. I don't know. I don't know that I agree with that. And here's why. So we know Cleveland, right? Cleveland wasn't selected by Byron Preiss. Cleveland was selected by JJP. JJP was like, hey, I've got this really great idea of where we can bury one. Let me tell you about it, right? So not a lot of research had to be done there. I think that he went to these areas, had a general understanding of why he wanted to go there with the whole immigration theme, but I don't think he knew exactly where he wanted to bury any of these until he got there and did a little bit of research on his own when he got there and then figured out, okay, this is where I'm going to bury it.
I agree. Absolutely.
I don't think a lot of research went into this work. And so I don't think there was a lot of forethought, as well as I don't think that he thought that this was going to go on for 20 years. I think he really genuinely, and he's on record saying it, I thought he genuinely thought it was going to be found within a month for some of them, maybe a year for others. I don't think that he considered erosion into the factors. I just don't. And so, and then again, why I think he would have used trees. Because, yes, trees change, but I think he thought these were going to be figured out a lot quicker than they obviously have been.
I mean, like I said, Bradley, there's other poems that reference trees, this very specific tree. So I don't think trees are out of bounds, honestly. I do, and George, you're an expert on St. Augustine. The solve is at the base of a tall tree. End of story, right? It's that simple. So... Yeah. So let me
go ahead.
Let me ask a question, Bradley. I got a question for you, right? So is there anything, you've looked at this image a lot. I mean, I know that you're an expert on Roanoke. Is there anything
in my life?
Yeah, right. Is there anything in the image that stumps you? Right?
Yes.
Because I mean, you have some clear ideas on where you think what was intended here, but what are some of the things in the image that stump you?
Okay, so things I would love to know the answer of. So we have the two, some people call them bells, some people call them insulators, the two bell-shaped things hanging from, we'll call him the knight, from the knight's left arm. What the hell? What are those? Why are they there? And why does one have a small circle hanging from it? And why does one have a small, somewhat of a rectangle hanging from it?
I have a theory on that one.
Yeah, are those like a circle and square reference to the verse? Is there something there that we're missing?
No.
So you're reading into it.
What do we think those are?
that's just going too far. I don't think there's anything to do with the fact that one's a circle and one's a square.
What do we think? What do we think?
Here's what
that's just digging into it too much.
Here's my explanation, Bradley. I think that the bells are a clear reference to Albert Bell. Okay?
Albert, right?
Albert Bell.
But why put two of them?
Well, because Albert Bell didn't just build the Waterside Theater; he was also instrumental in building the Elizabethan Gardens.
That's true.
Because Bell was contributing to both of those properties. Also, underneath the bells, in my opinion, what you have a heart and you have a tea bag. Okay. Under the big bell, you have a tea bag, and under the smaller bell, you have a heart. And I think those are simply references to the to the English, and to their practices. That's my best guess at it. But last thing I'll mention, there is a Bell's Island, and actually, it's very interesting. Bell's Island is basically where, if you were to put Roanoke on the map and you see the outline of Roanoke is right to the right of the bells, that's where Bell's Island is. And it's really interesting. So it's geographically accurate.
Bill literally just face palmed and went, ugh. It was awesome.
It's just we're reading into too much. All the the three that have been found, when you look at the image, okay, we know there are 4 or 5 distinct things that we can, and they're obvious. Now that we know what home plate was and everything, they're obvious. There's nothing hidden. And looking at what's hanging off the bottom of the 2 bells, I think are insignificant to the solve. Completely, Bradley.
No way.
Completely.
No way.
You're reading way too much into it.
They are obvious.
Significant.
Yeah,
I agree with
there's
you.
nothing. I agree that they're a reference to Bell. Yeah, the gentleman who built the what was his name, John Bell or whatever. I agree with that. So what's hanging off the bells mean nothing.
Let me counter argue that. So if we're going to go with the Bell reference for the theater, right? Look at the knight's stomach. You don't get a better bell than that. I mean, come on, that's a ringing bell. That's a bell in motion ringing.
Well, I mean
You don't need those.
That's just shadowing.
No.
Yeah,
if you're gonna go for a bell, that's a bell. Now hold on. Let's not talk over each other. So as far as it being a heart and a teabag, I could see it possibly being a teabag. I could see that possibly. JJP is way too incredible of an artist for that to be a heart. If he wants it to be a heart, it's going to be a heart.
It's right.
It's not a heart. What is it? I don't know what it is, but it's definitely not a heart.
When I look at it closely, it looks like a heart, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I'm not so sure it's the most material clue, but yeah, that's what my best guess.
There. So you're asking what stumps me? That stumps the shit out of me. I don't know what that is, and it bothers me every single time I try to look at this image.
Let it go, Bradley. You have to let that go. It means nothing, Bradley.
Frozen is pretty good. I like Frozen. Now,
let me ask you guys a question, because it ties into all of this. If we think about the Chicago image, we think about, Castle Hat, the dude with the big castle on his head, right? Mm-hmm. Think about all the castles. Some of them have like pointed peaks. Some of them are, straight. What do those mean?
Mm-hmm.
What do they mean? They mean nothing. They mean
nothing.
Absolutely nothing. There's a circular offset moon lightning rod on one of them. What does that mean?
Nothing.
It means nothing. What else?
Well,
we've got some arches in there. What do they mean?
We don't know what it means or what it doesn't mean, right? We haven't had a conference with JJP where he's gone through it like he's gone with Boston. I mean, come on, the Boston Pops, right? What is the image with the beak next to the bubble mean? Who the fuck knows? Oh, JJP tells us it's the Boston Pops, right? I mean, there's going to be stuff that we don't know.
Yeah, okay. You keep going into Boston then, like. There's stuff in each of the, like, you can't, everything in an image can't be a clue.
Right.
No, but that's
exactly
so prominent. That's so prominent. Why would he randomly add that hanging from a line on...
Here's what I'll give you. Here's what I'll give you about that being important. This verse obviously calls out something in the image. It calls out the land by the window, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why can't it call out 2? You've got 2 of the exact same things. They're bells. One's got a circle. One's got a square. The verse asks you to pass circle and square. Why can't that be calling out the... I mean, if you want an obvious sort of simple explanation. The verse is telling you to pass this thing.
Yeah, and I don't disagree.
Yeah, it's not a square, though.
That's the only thing I can tie that to. It's not a perfect square, but it's close enough.
It's not a square, and it's not a circle either. I don't see a circle square there.
I don't know, but that's
meaningless.
That's something that I would love to know what the hell that's there for.
Yeah. I would say that it's probably not material, but it is a question mark. I gave you my best guess, but I don't know.
Does anybody subscribe to the idea that there is a rebus in this painting?
You guys had that.
Rebus is, Bradley.
You had that in another podcast. That was brought up in another podcast.
Yeah.
Some guy had a rebus.
What is a rebus?
Some guy.
What that is.
Some
guy did it.
Yeah. No. Somebody that's well versed in these puzzles, came up with that theory, and it could have merit. I'm not saying it's there. I'm not saying it's not there. I don't know. I just want to know if you guys think there's rebus there.
Sorry, Bradley.
No.
I don't remember.
Somebody. It was like Milwaukee. Like you have the millstone, the walkie stick, and then the key, and you squish them together, and you have Milwaukee.
Right.
Yeah, it was Brian Zen that came up with the answer for the rebus, and he did it on the spot. Yeah, it was crazy.
I think there is one rebus in here, and I think it is that the hands of the knight are extended outside the boundaries of the painting. So that very well could refer to the Outer Banks. Maybe that doesn't define a rebus. I'm not sure. But I do think the reason why the fingers are outstretched outside of the margins is because it's referring to the Outer Banks.
I think that's a very good possibility. Brian Zinn's on-the-spot solve was round, angle, nothing, Roanoke.
Right. It was all what was hanging under the left arm, wasn't it? Isn't that where he got the rebus from? The elements under the left arm or the...
So we were joking around earlier, some guy. So JM is the one that came up with it. He's a prominent hunter, and I don't know if he's currently active in it. I don't think he is. But he's the one that came up with the idea that there might be a rebus there.
And then
Brian Zinn on the spot was like, oh, well, it could be round, R-O, angle, A-N, nothing, no, and then there's a clock and a key, Roanoke. And we're like, shit, Brian, you're a fucking genius.
I think Brian is a genius, but I don't buy that.
I don't think it's right either, but it's still really cool that he came up with that on the spot.
Yeah.
Brian's not going to send you guys Christmas cards.
Cool guy. Well, does anybody else have anything that they want to cover that we haven't covered?
There's only one other thing. I want to go back to myself, and I know it's an unpopular one, but if you look again at a map, what's the name of the highway or the road right outside the Wright Brother Memorial?
Highway 12.
Nope. Croatoan.
Croatoan. Okay.
Right. So a lot of people keep talking about. Yeah. So could that be another clue taking you back to the Wright Brother Memorial? A lot of people I know when they were first looking at this were all talking about that Croatoan tree. Could it just be a reference? A long time ago.
No, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at the Croatoan tree. For those that don't know.
Actually, Bill, that road that leads south along the coast of the Outer Banks is actually also known as the South Virginia Dare Trail. Mm-hmm. So, again, hey, if you believe in the Virginia Dare solve, it's also called the South Virginia Dare Trail, FYI.
On a map, though, what is it called?
It's Croatoan,
I had to pick your map.
Right. So again, cool. if you stick with my philosophy that all you have is a library card, an encyclopedia, dictionary, and a map to solve these, to help you solve them, you're going to see Croatoan, not Virginia Dare.
So that's a cool idea. Ken,
just saying.
Yes.
Ken, I'm going to ask you to do some homework for me if you don't mind.
Okay.
So you're obviously very talented in getting images and finding things historically relevant. I'm going to ask you to find something for me if you can. So there used to be an actual CRO carved into a tree and a fence at Fort Raleigh. There are pictures of it. I have pictures of it. I want to see if you could find out when and where they were. That's something I have tried and been incredibly unsuccessful in doing.
Yeah, I've tried to, Bradley. I'll save you the trouble. I haven't been able to find it.
Right.
I can't. As far as anybody I've been able to talk to, they've always said that it was different every year of the play. That they.
Oh, no. So no, there's one that was not in the theater.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. And I think, are you referring to that really old picture in front of that tree? Yeah, yes. I've seen that picture. I don't even know where that is. I can't even place
Neither
where
do
on the
I.
property that is from.
Neither do I. I don't know where that is either.
Yeah. That's a tricky one.
There used to be like Palisades, and I know they removed the Palisades because they weren't historically accurate. But there were still some remnants of them, and there was a CRO carved into one of them after they had removed the rest of the Palisades.
Right. Yeah.
I wasted a lot of my life looking into it.
Trying to find. I can tell you, Bradley, I've wasted a lot of my life as well. I have never found where that tree is located. So
gotcha.
You and me both. Yeah.
All right. Well, guys, I really, really appreciate it. George, anything we haven't covered that you want to talk about?
No, I'm good.
No.
You don't want to talk about your Philadelphia theory?
I'm getting more disappointed in you, Roanoke. Maybe we should discuss alternate verses. I think that verse that starts like where the warm waters halt, that's probably the Roanoke verse, right?
Yes.
Oh, right.
Yes.
Okay.
I do have a real quick question for George, though, if we've got a minute. And I hope you don't mind me asking this. This was referencing back to your Q&A that you just did.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's
going to ask this question.
Yep.
I don't have an adequate. Okay, yeah, answer the question.
I know.
Or ask the question.
You know what's coming? Why is the Roanoke one unobtainable?
I don't know. I don't have an adequate answer for you. It was a conversation that just it's the feeling that I got. I have no real reason, so don't.
I can tell you. I can tell you my view. I can tell you why I think it's unobtainable because you're either dealing with the Elizabethan Gardens or the National Park Service.
Park Society.
National Park Service isn't going to let you dig unless you have, the support of the president. It seems, and God and everybody else. And the Elizabethan Garden has been very consistent in that so far they've denied every single request to dig on their property. So the prime dig locations for this cask are either in the Elizabethan Gardens or the NPS, and you're not going to make progress on either one, at least so far.
That's why I never
stymied everyone.
Yeah. That's why I never even bothered to pursue, because with me it's on NPS, so why bother? So, yeah.
Well, there has to be literally an X marks the spot, and you had to have literally proof that it's there, I think, to convince somebody, and even then. So I think it is a very, very, very tough one to surface. So, fingers crossed that maybe someday something will change, but I think it's going to be a tough one to recover.
And I feel like since we're talking about Roanoke, and it sounds like we're closing out, Bradley, are we closing out?
I think so. I think we've had a really good time and gotten a lot of great conversations.
Before we close out completely, I think it's important to note that just for all the new people, everybody in this live stream right now knows, but you might not. The Elizabethan Gardens, Fort Raleigh, the Wright Brothers Memorial, they all have cameras. They all have massive amounts of cameras. They can see you in the dark. They have microphones and motion detectors. They've got all kinds of crap. When people dig in those parks, I get a phone call and they yell at me, and I don't want to be yelled at anymore. So please don't dig in these parks. There is a procedure to get permission. You can go through the procedure. You still probably will not get permission. But if you want to get permission, there's a guy. His name is Mike Henry. He's the head of the parks park rangers at Fort Raleigh. You can contact him. You can shoot him an email, explain what you want to do. He'll give you a list of people that you got to contact. You got to contact all those people and convince them. And if you can convince everybody and satisfy all the requirements, you can dig a hole. No one has been able to do that. Just saying. But don't dig illegally. They will catch you, and
you will go to jail.
They're not playing around in Roanoke.
Yeah.
They are not. I mean, come on. We got stopped carrying a piece of wood from a busted gate. You're going to get arrested. Don't do it.
Yeah.
And guys, it's a beautiful park. If you've never been and you want to go and you don't have the means to go on YouTube, search Fort Raleigh 360. I took some time out on one of our trips, and I did what I feel like is an okay job of doing a 360 walk around of the entire grounds, not the Elizabethan Gardens, but of Fort Raleigh. So go look at that. It's I think 7 parts, if I remember correctly, and that'll at least let you see the beauty that is this park. It is one of my favorite places in the world. I have literally come to love this park. When I go there, I'm just happy. I'm at peace. It's a wonderful place to be.
Please, I agree, Bradley.
Please do not go and do any digging or probing in this park without permission.
I mean, unless you need a place to stay for like a month.
Right.
Some free meals and stuff. I mean,
a cot.
3 hots and a cot.
3 hots and a cot.
3 hots and a cot.
If you lost your job due to the coronavirus, grab a shovel, head over to the Wright brothers.
Non-essential.
Leanne, if you're watching, I know you're excited about hearing that they're moving the gazebo. So get in contact, and hopefully your spot will be able to be researched, dug and probed, GPR'd, something like that. I'm excited. I liked your theory. I loved what you had to say about that. I could be on board with that. I would love to be there whenever it happens. So keep me in the loop if you guys get into that. Thank you, everybody that reached out. Unfortunately, we couldn't have everybody on this live stream, but we're going to try and do this weekly. I know we said that last time, and it's been like 2 or 3 weeks, but we're going to try and do something weekly.
Weekly-ish.
Just to keep everybody, weekly-ish, and, just keep in touch with everybody during these crazy times that we're all living in. So Ken, Bill, thank you so much for taking time away from
my pleasure.
Family.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys.
Everybody in the community, thank you for watching. Thank you for participating. Thank you for just being in the community. And I joke about the Philadelphia solve. There's some out there solves. Who knows what's where? So please don't take that personally. We just like to have fun. Keep throwing out ideas. Keep helping each other out. And soon enough, we'll find this 4th cast somewhere.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank
See you guys later.